welcome back to my channel. My name is Becca and today we are looking at a super bizarre kidnapping case. Now all kidnappings are weird in their own right, but this one is one of the weirder ones. In fact, it got so much media attention that they made a Lifetime movie about it. You can still see it. It's on Amazon Prime, it's on Vudu. I think it's like $3 or $4. It's actually pretty good. But I'm going to tell you all about it right here, so don't worry about it. So if you are interested in bizarre kidnappings with torture and coffins under the bed and slave contracts, promising yourself to a slave trade organization called The Company, then keep watching because you're going to love this video. May 19th, 1977, a 20-year-old was going to a birthday party. She lived in Eugene, Oregon, and she needed to get to Westwood, California to attend this party. And she was going to do it by hitchhiking. Now I know that sounds crazy to us, but back in the 70s that was actually kind of normal. Everybody kind of hitchhiked everywhere. This person was no different. Her friends took her to the freeway where she was picked up by a complete stranger who took her all the way from Eugene to Red Bluff, California. But that was as far as that car was going, so she got out and tried to find another one. The first car that stopped wasn't going her way. The second car that stopped was full of dudes and she didn't feel safe getting into that car. The third car that stopped had Cameron and Janice Hooker and their brand new baby in it, and she felt very safe with this car. It wasn't until she was handcuffed in the back of a sedan with a knife to her throat and a box locked on her head did she realize that she had made a huge mistake. This is the kidnapping of Colleen Stan. So as far as Cameron and Janice's early life go, we don't know that much. What we do know is this. Cameron was pretty normal. He had two loving parents. There was no abuse. There was no trauma in his early years. He wasn't the worst student at school. He wasn't the best. He was just sort of an average, middle-of-the-road person with a middle-of-the-road life. Janice, a little less so. She had a very strict, borderlining on verbally abusive mother and completely absent father and was what you would consider a latchkey kid. When she was 15 in the 9th grade, Cameron was 19 and completely out of high school. They were introduced for the first time and they started dating. Things got weird right away. Cameron asked if he could suspend her naked from a tree in the woods and do things to her. She wasn't really keen on the idea, but she did want to make him happy, so she let him do it. She really didn't like it. But he was very tender and loving and kind of affectionate afterwards, and she really did like that. So she continued to let him experiment with her body. He even almost killed her once. He asked if he could hold her head underwater while they had sex, and although she was afraid, she let him do it, and he almost killed her. Now, instead of walking away like we all know that she should have, they got married when she was 16 and he was 20. She kind of was thinking that if they got married, he would calm down and things would get a little less violent. She was wrong. Things got worse. It was all the time. It was more violent than ever. And eventually she put her foot down and said, no more. I'm not letting you hang me from things. I'm not letting you whip me anymore. I'm not letting you strangle me while we have sex anymore. I'm not doing it. Cameron said, fine, then I want a slave. If you let me have a slave, I will stop abusing you and I will only abuse the slave. And at first, Janice says, that's insane, you're not doing that. But as the abuse continued and when she fell pregnant with their first daughter, she decided to let him do it. Really to protect herself and her baby. So on January 31st, 1976, they went out and they got their first slave. A 19-year-old named Maria Spunky was their first. He would kidnap her, take her back to their home, back to their basement. He would rape her. He would torture her. But she fought back a lot and she made a lot of noise, so he ended up strangling her to death. And they wound up burying her body 60 miles away in Lassett Park. And he still wanted his slave. And May 19th, when he was driving home from work, he passed Colleen Stan hitchhiking and he knew this was it. He went home, he got his wife and his baby, and they went back and picked her up. She was in the car, they made small talk, they were very friendly and nice, and they pulled over to get some gas. Colleen excused herself to go to the bathroom, and when she came back, everybody was gone. She thought maybe they were just inside, so she got back in the car, in the back seat. In the back seat with her was a wooden box, about a foot square. It had holes on the bottom with hinges, so like a trap door could open up. She was like, it's weird, I don't know what that is. It wasn't in here before. Cameron got back to the car. Instead of getting in the front seat, he got in the back seat and held a knife to Colleen's neck. He put handcuffs on her wrists and on her ankles, and he put that box over her head. The little trap doors would close around her neck, and the hole was a little too small, and so it was choking her just a little bit. But the box was lined with carpet, the edges were filled in with foam, so the whole purpose of it was to block light and sound from getting in or out of the box. The only thing she could hear in there was her breath. Cameron drove around for the rest of the day, whether that was to confuse Colleen as to where she was going, or it was to make sure that he was bringing his slave into the house after sundown. He didn't get back to the house until dark. He took the box off, led her down to the basement with a blindfold on. He then hung her by her wrists from the ceiling, and him and Janice had sex underneath of her, taking breaks every couple of minutes to whip Colleen. When they were finished, Janice went upstairs to prepare dinner, and Cameron put the box back on Colleen's head, bound her wrists over her head, and locked her in a crate. Left her there for a couple of hours, and before bed came back downstairs, repositioned her, and chained her onto a homemade rack device. She would spend the next 7 days, 23 hours a day, chained to this rack in his basement. When she wasn't chained to the rack, she was given one meal, one glass of water. She was allowed to go to the restroom, and then she was beaten for the rest of that hour. After that first week, Colleen was moved into a homemade wooden box resembling a coffin. It was 6.5 feet long, 2.5 feet wide, and 20 inches tall. She no longer had to wear the 20-pound wooden box on her head. Now she was locked in this coffin for 23 hours a day, let out only an hour in the evenings for food, water, a bathroom break, and to be tortured, whether that be drowned or whipped with a cat of nine tails or a bullwhip or strangled. Whatever sick thing Cameron could think of. While she was in the box, she had wax put in her ears so she couldn't hear anything, and she had a chain going from her neck down to her ankles, so she was always kind of in this arched position. She was never able to be comfortable or straighten out, and made her whole body hurt all the time. After the first 3 months in captivity, she was allowed to take a bath. Before she was kidnapped, she had hair down to the small of her back, but because of the lack of bathing and the lack of brushing or grooming, it got all matted and they had to cut it all off. A lot happened 7 months into her captivity. She was given a workshop where at night she was let out of her box and was told to do little tasks, whether that was sanding wood or cracking nuts or like macrame projects, things like that. Colleen suspected that they were selling the things that she was making. She was also introduced to the idea of the company 7 months in. You see, the company is this made-up organization that would buy, sell, and trade women for the purposes of being slaves. And if the slaves ever acted up or tried to escape, the company would torture and kill their family. Once Cameron believed that Colleen believed the company was real, he forced Colleen to sign a slave contract, volunteering to be his slave in whatever form that meant. This allowed her a little bit more freedom. She was allowed out of the box, allowed out of the basement, and up into the main house a few hours a day to do housework. 8 months into her captivity, it had only been about torture and control. There was no sexual component at all until 1987 when he raped her for the first time. Immediately following this rape, Janice began to hate Colleen. She was no longer taking the abuse away from her. She was taking her husband away from her too. In April of '78, the Hooker family moved into a trailer. They no longer had a basement in which to keep Colleen, so they had to come up with something new. Cameron built her a new box. This one was small. This one was 6 feet long, 33 inches wide, and 15 inches tall, and it was tucked underneath of their waterbed, and it opened like a coffin. She was only let out for an hour a day to eat and get a drink of water. She had a bedpan in the coffin with her that she was allowed to empty, and whatever time was remaining in that hour, she was tortured. Of course, she was allowed to stay out longer if he was having fun, but as soon as he was done, she was locked back away underneath of the bed. In late spring of 78, for the first time since she had been kidnapped, she was allowed to put on clothes and go outside. She was sent outside to do hard labor, dig holes and stuff. Then in the summer, she was allowed to do gardening, and she would spend the next year living in that coffin, only being allowed out for hard labor, torture, or chores. In September of 78, Janice gave birth to their second daughter. Cameron delivered that baby on their waterbed, with Colleen locked in the coffin underneath. 2 years into the captivity in 79, Janice got a job working at a fast food restaurant, so she was gone in the evenings. During the evenings, Cameron would force Colleen to cook for him, making him steak and potatoes while she ate rice and oatmeal, and the sexual assault went up quite a bit. It went up to 2 or 3 times a week. Slowly, Colleen got more and more freedom. She was actually able to talk to the neighbors. At no point did she indicate that she was in trouble or that she was being tortured or she had been kidnapped. In 80, Janice got a new job working during the day, so Cameron left Colleen home alone with their children, and she acted as their babysitter. His brainwash and his control over her was so strong that she never once tried to escape. By her 3rd anniversary with the Hooker family, she was spending almost no time in the coffin. In fact, she spent most of her days out in the house. At night, she slept in the living room on a long chain that was chained to the toilet. Sometimes Janice and Cameron would take Colleen in these little excursions out of the house. One time, Janice and Colleen actually went to a bar and went home with 2 guys. Still never said anything. His control was so strong. In her 3rd year, she was allowed to call her sister, have a 1-hour phone call with her. She told her she was fine and that she was living up north with some friends. They still were very worried about Colleen. They'd been looking for her since she went missing, and they tracked that phone call to Chino, California, but that didn't lead them to Colleen. She was also able to call her dad a few times, to write a few letters home, and in March of 81, 2 months shy of their 4-year anniversary, Cameron tested Colleen. Cameron took her outside, put her on her knees, gave her a shotgun, and told her to put it in her mouth and pull the trigger. Without flinching, without question, she did it. And he knew he had complete control over her. And as a reward, she was allowed to go spend 24 hours with her family without him. They didn't ask her once where she had been. They assumed because of her homemade clothes, her pale skin, and the fact that she lost so much weight, they thought she was in a cult, and they were just happy that she was there. Cameron came and picked her up and actually went inside and met her family. He introduced himself as Colleen's fiance. Her sister wasn't sold and didn't believe him and thought something was weird, so she took this picture of them, both smiling. They got in the car and they went back to their home in Red Bluff, and she was on complete lockdown after that, back to 23 hours a day in the coffin for the next 3 years. This time she was only allowed out of the box after the kids had gone to bed. She was so well hidden, in fact, that the children thought that she had moved away. Not only was the box claustrophobic, was it a sensory deprivation chamber of sorts, but it also got up to 120 degrees in that box, and if she were to complain or say anything about it, she was beaten viciously for it. May 7th of 84, Colleen was allowed out of the box again, was allowed to do household chores, and she was actually offered a job by the neighbor working in a local motel. She had a lot of freedom. She was even taken on family vacations with the 2 kids and his wife. He was having a great time, but it was nearing an end. One day, while Colleen was at work, Janice came to see her. She said, "The company is real, but Cameron is not a part of it." Colleen saw an opportunity to escape. She called her dad, asked him to wire her some money so that she could take a bus home, and she left. When she left, Janice made her promise not to call the cops right away. She wanted to see if she could change Cameron's behavior. So when her family was excited to see her and wanted her to tell the police what was going on, she refused. Janice told Cameron that if his behavior changed, that Colleen would come back. Colleen actually called the Hooker home 29 times in a 3-month time span. But eventually Janice realized that Cameron was never going to change, and she called the police on him. And in November, 3 months after Colleen left the Hooker house, Janice called the police. At first, the police didn't believe Janice. Colleen hadn't filed a report or called the police or anything. But they called and confirmed everything, and Colleen told them every detail about what had happened to her over the last 7 years. On November 18th, 1984, Cameron was arrested on charges of kidnapping and sexual assault. In September of 85, the trial started, and Cameron pled not guilty. He said that Colleen had volunteered for everything. They had smiling photos of him and her family. He said that she had opportunities to escape at any given time. She talked to the neighbors, she had a job, she wanted to be there. But in exchange for immunity, Janice testified against Cameron, confirming everything that had happened over the last 7 years. He was sentenced to 104 years in prison. The next time he'll be eligible for parole will be in 2022. Colleen went on and got married. She got a degree in accounting, and she is doing everything that she can to live her life to the fullest to make up for those 7 years. Cameron was never charged or convicted for the death of Maria. He's the only one who knows where her body is. There is no evidence, and he's the only one linked to her disappearance. But he's never said anything, and they've never found the body. All right, guys, that was the totally insane kidnapping of Colleen Stan. I know, it's super bizarre. I think the whole contract thing was probably the weirdest part for me. Some of you are sure are saying, well, I would have escaped. If I had the opportunity, I would have ran. Maybe. You don't know until you're in that situation. There's a thing called Stockholm Syndrome where basically the captor starts to side with the kidnapper. When they're freed, they'll say things like, they took really good care of me, they were really nice, don't be too mean to them. It's a survival technique. It's a way that the body and the brain adapts to survive in a situation that it's not meant to survive in. I don't know. What do you guys think? What do you guys want to hear about next? I had a lot of fun. I really enjoy reading or hearing about this case. I think it's interesting and crazy. I think it's weird that there's no trauma in his background. Like, he's not your stereotypical criminal, you know? There's nothing that pushed him to this. He's just crazy. Alright guys, I had a lot of fun making this video. I hope you enjoyed watching it. I will see you in the next one. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I have linked my merch down below. We've got the Black Cherry Heart shirts, we've got the Albert Fish shirts, we have the Weirdo shirts. They're all pretty cool. And when you get yours in the mail, I want to see pictures of it. I want to see how good you look repping that Killer Family merch. Ooh, that's stupid. Guys, I will see you next time. Like, subscribe, comment, do all those things. I love you so much. And don't forget that none of us are saints and that you are loved and appreciated and you're awesome and amazing. And I'll see you next time. Okay, bye.